Well, I'm not happier because I have X amount of followers. I'm not happier because I have X amount of dollars in my bank account. I thought those would be the things. Okay, what just happened here? Why do I still feel sad and anxious every single day when I wake up? And why is it super hard for me to create sometimes and super easy at other times? I'm no longer motivated by views and likes and gaining followers. It's now that I look at being like, how can I use my platform to add value to the world in a good way?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 141 of the 505 podcast. Today we got Chris Howe on the pod to ring in the new year.
Dude, happy 2025.
Happy 2025 rocks. I'm very excited about this one because Chris talks about the death of the agency today. Now, he is coming in with a team of 4 to 6 absolute killers. Okay, these are people that are wearing multiple hats, and he's saying the agency model is dead. The idea of paying, $1 million to a traditional agency and they got 75 people on set. He's like, listen, we got 4 to 6 people. They all crush it. They're going to wear multiple hats, and we're going to create a very similar product at a very competitive price. We go through the logistics. I want you to be the judge, see if this is something that makes it all the way through 2025 and keeps on crushing it, because it's a very interesting model, and he's at the center of it, right? He's getting these brands that are coming to him for his personal brand and then saying, hey, we got this other thing. Come check this out. We have this production company and it's doing super well. It was an awesome combo.
Yeah, hearing how he's able to take an inbound lead for something for his personal brand and then turn it into a full-fledged production was really, really interesting. And also, he gets very vulnerable on this podcast. It's Chris Howe like you've never heard him before. And I just really appreciate how vulnerable he got on this episode, because I think a lot of you guys will be able to relate to a lot of things that he talks about.
He's also a YouTube savant. I mean, he's been doing this for so long. He's at the top of his game. He does travel content. He does tech reviews, something that a lot of people want to get into. And we ask him the nitty gritty of exactly how he makes his videos, how he comes up with these ideas. And they're very actionable steps for you guys who I know are trying to make a YouTube channel in 2025. I don't want to hold you any longer. Let's get into it. Chris, you told me that you wanted a demonstration. I'm going to show you a great demonstration here. So that is like a really high score. That had a great crack, super clean, probably like an 8.6. I'm going to show you what not to do on my left. Okay.
All right. So finger not on the trigger.
Not on the lid. Yep. Boom.
Lift off.
You spilled over our whole damn table.
Yeah, big spillage.
You didn't dent it. I'm going to give you a 7-1. That's one of your best you've ever done. Chris, give me the one-handed crack over there in Canada.
Okay. I'll put this down so we can see a bit of a table here. Can we see it?
Boom.
Yep.
Okay.
So, a lot of anticipation. Okay. Oh,
right there.
Okay, we're going to clean off your laptop before the show starts. Give me a spin. Did you dent it? You got to be honest with me. I can't really see it.
There we go. I got here. We got 1.
Okay.
And
2 drops.
3, 4.
Did you dent it?
No. This is a clean can right now.
6-9 from Chris. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. Cheers.
Cheers, brother, from over across.
Cheers.
Dude, I'm really glad we finally got to do this. I know that we met in person. I was about to say Kando, but it wasn't Kando. It was in fucking Tokyo, which is incredible.
What a legendary moment at the Fujifilm headquarters in like their top secret room. We were in the hallway and we were like, I know you.
Yeah, it was great. So on our pre-show call, you told us that going into this new year, you kind of want to go all in with your production company and a little bit less with YouTube. And I wanted to know why that is.
I think for me at this stage of my career, I had checkmarked all of the boxes that I really wanted to achieve when it came to my personal brand and then just like my ego. And so really where I'm at now, 6 or 7 years into this, a big part of my priorities is like community and building businesses. And so, after experimenting and kind of doing a little bit of a side hustle again with the production company, because I came from a world of owning like an agency and production company, slowed that down, went all in on YouTube. And now we're kind of coming full circle again, where I want to leverage all of the amazing people that I've met, the connections, the opportunities that are being presented, as well as like looking at where like the market is now. So part of it is that I experienced both really great things on the production company side and then my like more negative experiences, or I guess lessons that I learned had to do with like really big teams. And I was like, I don't want a 17-person crew anymore. I really found the sweet spot in this world where people were basically doing 2 jobs on set versus just like one individual job. And our teams were like 4 to 6 people. And we were just more nimble. The location became like a bigger priority and played a bigger role. So we were able to like fly to locations, get better like art direction, and then also just work with problem solving individuals who are able to kind of have the experience of multiple jobs. And I think this is all from the place that we come from. We're all creators. So we had to like shoot and edit, or we had to produce, direct, shoot, and edit. And I think these are the types of people that I've networked with. And I also noticed that this is where the industry is going. And I want to lean more into being able to build bigger and better things, both visually and from a storytelling perspective, rather than trying to just do it all on my own. And so that's why the tables have turned, per se, into looking at what will be what we're calling all caps collective.
I mean, I think the motto for 2025 is small teams, big checks, you know?
I heard that a couple of times, and I think that's a great motto.
So I have a question for you, because I also own a production company, and I've been on sets like you, and you've seen like 35 people, and half of them like have their hand in their pants and they're not really working. And you're like, what's going on here? What are we doing? And, similarly, crossing past over the creator side, you're like, you see these people who are solo people, and they're making these immaculate films. Where did the idea come from to just, trim the crew down to 4 to 5 people? And do you feel like the quality has lessened having a smaller team versus having a massive team?
To be honest, I actually think it's quite the opposite. I think the moment you start to bring on bigger teams, everyone is trying to prove their value. And when you have people really advocating for the reasons why they're there, usually it means that it will end up on the final creative. And so you end up getting something that typically can feel overcooked and kind of loses a bit of its life. And I found that having a smaller team meant that it was more collaborative in a way that everyone could kind of put their egos down and just like make sure that we protect the creative and the idea at the core. And I think my experiences is that big teams kind of overcooked, too many cooks in the kitchen, and small teams allowed the actual creative to breathe and remain true to its essence, and also be able to tweak quicker to be able to adapt to the market at the time. And that's really just through the only way you can actually figure out this is through experience.
I know we've all seen it, right? You're on set and they're like, we got to move lights. We'll be back in an hour.
Yep.
And right, when you have a littler team, you're able to move a lot quicker. With the smaller team, what is the ideal package? Like, do you have, as a person, just shooting? And then do you have a director? And then what would the 4 to 6 people, their jobs look like on a shoot day?
Yeah. And kind of going back to our ethos of people wearing like 2 hats at any time, you'd probably have somebody who would be like a producer, director, shooter, editor, and then you'd have someone who'd be like AD, assistant, AC, like somebody who's kind of like a floater, and then you'd have talent. And then that talent, maybe in our situation, is also happens to be like a photographer, so you can kind of hit like a multitude of different deliverables, as well as making sure that everyone's kind of being held accounted for. But I think the most important roles that always have to be like there no matter what, which we found, was you still need somebody to be like a project manager and an assistant director that kind of keeps everybody in check. Because the issue with a quote unquote, like they used to word, I don't like this word, but we'll share what was used in the industry. This is not my word, but they used to call them like predators, producer, director, editors. And the issue that I find with these individuals is that typically they want to move so quickly on the fly because they see the vision in their head, but then you end up missing out shots that are important for the client. So I think a project manager and director and or assistant director role makes sure that we like keep the super talented people that we bring on our teams accounted for all the things that we actually need at the end of the day. Because I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've definitely come back from shoots being like, we literally didn't shoot the key thing that we were supposed to get, but we had this amazing footage of sunset with birds flying that might not even make it in the final edit. So I think you need somebody that sees vision, is held accountable to like the creative as well as the needs of the client. And then you also need people who are flexible, problem solvers, and people who can really make beautiful things on the fly that don't need like 6 people to run a camera anymore. And that's actually part of what I think is interesting is that we're getting into a world where the technology is allowing for smaller teams, which is amazing, as well as the fact that people are getting their reps in by being on YouTube where they have to do it. So now you have these double pairings. And I think that's also why we're naturally seeing smaller teams.
How do you go about finding people that are comfortable enough wearing like multiple hats on set? How do you go through your vetting process? And like, do you have those go-to people that you use for like every shoot now?
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to expand where we have a couple people in different like parts of the world, but one is like they always had some element of pursuing social media on their own terms. So they were like making passion projects, and then eventually those projects and or YouTube videos turned into them being like solo creators where they're like working with brands. And so if you kind of like start to dig and deep dive, there'll be somebody who has a bit of a personal brand, and those numbers can look usually like a falling from like 5,000 to 20,000. That seems to be this like sweet spot when they like got a big peak of growth. And then all of a sudden you could probably see that they got all these opportunities from the work that they were doing. And then their social careers tapered off a little bit. But then now they're just in like the craziest demand for all the production companies and clients wanting to work with them directly, not even agencies anymore.
Was there a specific shoot where you first tried out this like smaller team thing and you were like, oh, the end, like it was more enjoyable on set and the end product actually turned out better than we expected?
Yeah, I mean, it ends up being a lot of the times where I was able to test those ideas on like my own projects through my own social brands, because typically we sell a package where it'll be like a Chris Howe facing project where there'll be some deliverables either on YouTube or social media. And then the client also finds out that we have the ability to make them like super high quality assets. And we have the experience of running an agency where they want the good comms and back and forth communication over scripts. And so just the more and more I had those experiences contrasted with trying to scale something up. And really what I thought in my head was, if I have a team of 15 people, I'll feel even more professional. It will look even more serious. I'll build the marketing around that so I get more jobs like that. And the irony is I got all that and I was like, I'm not putting that stuff out because it's only going to get me more of those jobs. And I didn't enjoy myself on them. And it had more to do with losing the essence of like my enjoyment in it and watching how I just became a manager and losing sight that I was also a creator too. Because the ethos of this like company that we're trying to build is that I still am the person that's shooting. I don't want to just be like a company owner. I'm still on the ground, one of the crew that's wearing multiple hats.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I think a lot of people that may be a videographer or you're a DP and then you're like, I want to start an agency. And then you end up managing a lot of people instead of actually making the thing. So it's really cool that, you know, you've centered it around like, hey, I want to be the one to shoot this stuff and I'm going to bring on people around me. Who's been a pivotal hire in the company if you do have like your full-time crew or people that you keep bringing on? What are those people looking like? Is it a producer? Like what are the jobs that you don't enjoy doing the most that you brought on other people to help you with?
Typically the first hire was always like an editor, just because the editing process has so much like back and forth, especially with the client. And I'm the person that gets the most life out of like on set and shooting. So some of the key hires for me, like my favorite people on our team are the people who are shooter and editor. And so they come in, they make an incredible visual. They're like adding to our script ahead of time, like their own vision for it. And then they get all the footage and then they make the first like cut. And then we can go back and forth until it arrives at the client. So in a perfect world, I would love to work even more with somebody who is like great at comms, great at shooting, great at editing. And this is like a really hard triangle to find. Like you think you know it. The irony is that as you scale, you're like, oh, I know so many people. But there's always one part of that triangle that's just super weak. And most of the time, if they're really talented, they don't know communication and timelines and getting back to emails on like an appropriate way, because they're the type of people that like edit all night and are the people that will send you like a cut at 4 a.m. and you're like, I don't want the email at 4 a.m. Send it to me at 9 o'clock when I'm in office, so that we can have like a nice process and good work-life balance.
You heard a schedule.
And so
send.
I do, yeah, I do have a handful of people of like the trifecta. But the hard part of that is that as you work with them on a freelance basis, because our collective isn't full-time employees. These are people that are like essentially really talented and are also running their own projects. They're just also highly in demand. And then the more that we do our own work and showcase them, funny enough, the more that they get like poached by other people too. So it's a bit of like a cycle that it's hard to, those individuals don't even want to be full-time hires. They still want to remain freelance too. So it's a very interesting thing when it comes to the dynamics of working with those individuals, because you need a lot of them. They're super rare. And when they do reach the top and everyone knows them, you can't even book them out unless it's like 2 months in advance.
How do you go about educating these clients on your guys' process? Because I'm sure a lot of the people that you've worked with are these huge Fortune 500 brands, and they're used to the 45-person sets, the whole shebang. And it's like, hey, we do this a little bit differently and we're going to make a better product. How do you go about that on the phone with them?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's always about showcasing the benefit to them. Like this is something that ultimately impacts their bottom dollar in a meaningful way, but it also means that we can work quicker and faster. And I think a lot of the times brands are seeing that a typical shoot might take like 3 to 4 months for it to go from like start, pre-production, production, post-production, release, where we can actually shorten that timeline with smaller teams, which means that you're getting more content out and you're getting people that have experience with social media a lot of the times. And so you're not even just hiring someone that's great at visuals, you're hiring someone that's also able to wear a hat where they can put themselves in the shoes of the client and recognize, oh, the client would actually really like this because I've done so many projects like this in the past. And so they're not just going, here, let's light it. Let's put like a key light here, a hair light, all this stuff. They're going, actually, what's in the background is not relating to this project at all. Let's get that out because I can already foresee that being a problem. And so for us, these smaller teams have allowed us to actually get more business because it's more cost effective, as well as they're getting the same quality and deliverables as what you're getting out of a larger team most of the time. And that's usually just letting the work speak for itself.
I don't know if you saw this the other day. There was a LinkedIn post and it was from someone at Wieden & Kennedy. And they were like, we just made this Nike campaign. And it was like, oh my gosh, it was like, felt like 37 different pitches, 9 months of work. And all the comments were like, this is like the exact opposite of what we should be doing. And like, kudos to their team for like making this awesome commercial and whatnot. But it's like in that time period, we probably could have made 12 spots.
So they were saying that it was like, how awesome was it?
Yes, how awesome was it that we put in all this hours? Like there was someone that worked on the campaign and they like had the campaign linked. And I was just thinking, I went to like our partner Sharif here and I'm like, dude, this is ridiculous. This is exactly like why we started the company, because this is insane that you have a brand that's going back and forth on this. And I bet that, like you were saying, there's probably 100 people that are looking at this, tweaking it. And by the end of it, it's like, this isn't even something that this isn't even where we started at all. It's a completely left field. I kind of want to hear your take on just where the advertising industry is at and where you saw, white space to kind of take control for your company.
Well, one is what I think is really interesting in terms of how the market is going is that the conversations that I'm having with brands, they don't like chatting with an intermediary company anymore. They don't want to have to be like, oh, here's the agency on record for everything. They are actually starting to experiment with smaller teams that can then go out and produce the content and work directly with the creator or work directly with a collective. And so they found that it even slowed down the process having someone like, let's call them like in the role of, like an agency, someone who is like advocating on both sides. But the reality is that people are starting to get so many reps on the creator side that even the creators are starting to go like, I actually don't even need this agency in the middle because they're already taking like a fat chunk. And I think the part that a lot of agencies are struggling with is even showcasing their like value in terms of that. Because you have conversations where they're going, well, you're just taking 15% or you're taking like 30%. And if you pass that savings on to the creator, they're going to be even more motivated to either put that back into the production, the visuals, and or the actual just rate in terms of like how the creator feels rather than feeling taken advantage of. They're actually feeling empowered, which is like a very big shift. So that's one thing, is that these are actual conversations I'm having with direct to client, because a lot of conversations were like myself to agency, agency to client. And over the last 2 years, it's more client to me directly. And I think that's a really fascinating aspect of like where things are going now too.
Going on the opposite side, like you obviously are a very successful creator. You've done YouTube, Instagram, like you have a huge following where you have experience doing brand deals, right? As like a solo creator. How has the positioning of having an agency and a production company allowed you to get maybe different jobs, are you able to land maybe even bigger jobs or different jobs with your company versus as a solo creator?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what it ends up being is like an a la carte thing. So you end up having conversations where maybe they're coming in for like a YouTube ad spot, and then you jump on a call and you're like, by the way, we also have the ability to do this. Check out our portfolio. They look at the portfolio and they start to go, oh, I want that too. Here, why don't we do both? Or actually, why don't you make the commercial, you be in it, because we also want you to be the spokesperson or the voice for it, which was a conversation that happened when we did like the DJI Mic 2 ads and as well as the Insta360 Flow ads. Is that part of that was like, here's a YouTube ad spot, also make us the commercial for the launch for it, and can you also be a brand ambassador for it? So then there's this like way bigger package that gets sold just from a starting conversation of like, can you do like an Instagram reel? And so that can just span all the way up. And so what's really nice is that as an individual brand, I can bring in a lot of opportunities for long-term things. And so for example, like I worked with Fairmont in Toronto. We did like a project with them where it was literally just like come and stay for the weekend, shoot some photos of like you in the hotel. And then they realized that they're like, well, we love these photos. They're actually as the same quality as what we would need in our marketing. Can you actually just be one of our vendors? And then that turned into being like, they're an ongoing client now that like the production company manages. And there's projects that you'll never see on my socials, but that client came from being a social media content creator.
Have you been to the Fairmont at Lake Louise?
Yes, this is one of the most amazing locations ever. I have the most incredible story of that too, where we went to the Lake Louise location in early spring. They had just opened up the lake to be able to take the canoes on it. And it was right in that period where you could still get crazy snowstorms. And so we went in the night it downpoured. In the morning we woke up, the canoes were available. So red canoes with just fresh pow of snow on all the trees. It was like one of the most incredible moments of my life.
Yeah, that's...
I think we need to go to the Fairmont, man. Yeah, I think we need to get out there and get a little 3-day trip to the Fairmont.
Lake Louise, man, is just I've never been. It seems like a really special
you were talking
place.
A big game like you had been to
No,
Lake Louise.
just seen it. It's just a bucket list.
Okay.
I mean, dude, like your buddy Peter McKinnon made the first bucket shot video.
So
He made it about that.
The whole
moment.
joke was that I texted Pete because he was like waiting months and built it all up in that video. And I was like, oh, dude, I just woke up. Like I'm literally having a croissant right now. And I just happened to get the conditions that you dreamed about. I got the bucket shot without trying.
That's funny. You've been in the game so long from a creator as well as from a production company standpoint. How do you go about landing these bigger jobs, Chris, on the phone? What are some of the key questions that you're asking to kind of decide, like, is this a good fit for us? Or is this something that like I don't want to do? I mean, you've been in it for so long, and I'm sure we have a lot of listeners that might be starting their own production companies, or maybe they're in it and they're trying to get to that next jump and land those bigger jobs. What are some of those conversations looking like?
A lot of the time it's recognizing where you're getting like push and pull. So, you know, when I'm on a conversation or I'm having a conversation with a potential client, one, you have to have this like gut check to recognize that if they like respect your timelines, if they start to actually, even in those initial emails, are they responding to you in a quick way? Because one of the issues is that it always falls on the creator or on the production company if we're delayed, but what always delays everything is typically the client. So you already have to start to recognize, you can't even ask the question like, will you respect this timeline? You have to pay attention to like already the initial conversations that you're having. Are they willing to jump on a call with you? If they're not willing to jump on a call with you, they're probably just searching for a quote, looking to like have it be competitive, and they've already picked somebody else. So if they just want you to send a proposal for the project that you're working on, but they don't want to have a call with you, instantaneously, you've probably already lost the job. So I think that's like a massive part of it. If they're not going to take 15 minutes to talk to you, they're probably going to work with someone else anyways. So I've experienced that a lot, and that you have to make a proposal that takes you an entire week to lose the job to recognize I probably should have just...
Oh, Chris, tell me about it, dude. Oh my God.
Sounds kind of familiar.
Sounds really familiar, like something we just dealt with like 2 weeks ago on a really big job, and I'm still butthurt about it. And seriously, it's all good. It's all good.
And then you're like, you feel like you have the job
you feel like
locked in.
You have the chance. I'm like,
buying this.
Just got a red Porsche, dude.
Yeah.
Getting a new camera. What kind of new gear are we buying, dude, with this money that's coming in?
I also think it's really important to understand the person that you're chatting with. Like if it's the owner of the business versus somebody who's in a role that has experience making videos. So I would even say like when you're talking to the point of contact at whatever company or agency, literally be like, tell me a little bit about your experience in this field. And be like, and then the best projects in my opinion are people who are like, I've worked on these campaigns, we produced this many videos, we've done this many photo shoots. Because now you don't need to advocate for why certain cameras are there, why certain lighting is there, why certain people are getting hired on set, because they understand it. And you'll waste so much time advocating and explaining something to someone if they don't understand the value of why it should be there. And I think the best way to put in reps for explaining value, but don't do it all the time, is if you end up being like a wedding videographer, because every single time you're pitching your value as a wedding videographer, you have to explain it from the beginning. But if you can work with a client that has experience, that's done it, that understands that there'll be hiccups and delays, then that's a massive part of it. So even asking questions of like, hey, what's your experience with video? What's your experience with photo shoots? Like funny enough, I was chatting with somebody yesterday and they got double booked on a shoot because the person who booked them thought photo shoot and video shoot were the same thing. So he showed up and like there was an entire photo shoot happening and he's like, I'm here to shoot video. And they're like, no, you're not. And then he talked to the person who hired him and then they were like, oh, my apologies. I thought they were the same thing. Which is just part of it is like education. And two, that's just a level of like respect of your time too. So you want to work with competent clients as well, which is difficult because if you're getting hired by a lot of startups, it could just be the owner of the company trying to be like, we just need a video. And you're like, well, what's the vision for it? Like, I don't know. I just trust you. No, give me some parameters and box to play in. And if they're not going to give you any box to play in, walk away. Like it's already a red flag.
Yeah, 100%. You also like, you're getting to work with some pretty amazing brands because of the way that you've positioned yourself. I think about you and like you're doing both tech and travel. I feel like that's kind of like your bread and butter as a creator. And like, I think about DJI and I'm like, well, that aligns perfectly with you. So can you talk about your positioning as a creator and also as a production company and like how your specific positioning has allowed you to work with certain brands?
I mean, one of the benefits of being a YouTuber that happens to do camera reviews and talk about a lot of tech is that you're genuinely chatting with the clients directly in that space. And so when you will always get what you put out to some degree, especially if you do and put in the reps over a long period of time. So for my experience and from the times of like, I really want to make travel videos, I had to make so many of my own travel videos that weren't paid. And then I had enough of a portfolio that would bring that in. Then you start to pair it with being like, well, why don't we work with a tourism board and we'll make a video about the latest launch of a OnePlus phone. And now OnePlus is getting amazing assets, shot in amazing locations. The location's getting all this marketing. And so you can actually like double down in campaign deliverables while having sub-marketing categories within it. So in a perfect world, we'll pair everything up, which is kind of awesome, where you have like a clothing brand, you have like a tech brand, you have like a tourism board, you have a car brand, you have like a travel agency and or like airline, and you do like one big project. And what started off as like maybe a $10,000 project can turn into like a multi-six figure just by like selling in all the different verticals that are non-competitive.
Which starts first? Are you hitting up the tourism board? You're like, okay, we're going to this fucking sick country. Now, who else can I get on board?
Well, really, the spark can come from anywhere, which is kind of awesome. In any one of those, you can get the ball rolling. So, you know, in that instance, let's talk about like the OnePlus program and campaign that we did, where it was basically inbound lead for OnePlus. Then all of a sudden, we're going, hey, why don't we have an amazing place to shoot this? Because Toronto in the winter, it just ain't it right now. Let's go somewhere nice. And so we had some leads at the California Tourism Board in Monterey. And then we ended up being able to get them on board to even cover all the expenses. And then from that point, we had an amazing location. And then we also happened to go, well, now we have an amazing location. We have one creator. Do you want like 3 more homies to be a part of this? And now we're selling in even friends to get the jobs where now you can make a bigger package. So like that's where a spark starts from like a tech brand and then expands outwards. But I would say for anyone that's listening right now, I had experience early on in my career where I booked my own trips. And then I just said to the tourism boards, I'm already coming. Can you provide any support? And for a lot of tourism boards, the most expensive part of any like content creators like PR package is their flights. And so if you're already in the location, it's so much easier for them to like touch base with all of their like tourism partners and go, hey, kayaking sub company, you'd be interested in this creator? And then they can help build an itinerary for you because you've just taken off the hardest part of their budget to access, which is usually flights. And these companies will try their best to like prime you to be happy like any PR person. So a lot of the times they're already thinking, well, that's a business class flight. So now I have to budget $3,000 to send you somewhere, right? But if you're just flying and you were cool flying like economy somewhere, then the rest is easy because most of the time that's just them putting you in touch with other companies in that area. So that, what I want you to take from that, just as like part of what we were chatting about, is that you can just book your own trips and then reach out to the companies being like, I'm already here. What can you do? Or can I assist you in anything there? And that just happened naturally by having a portfolio, booking my own flights, and then just hustling hard to see if anybody would give me a free paragliding lesson.
Dude, put me in the back of the plane. I'm cool with the back.
To me, not so much.
You could always
First class or not.
You fly in the back always, dude.
We recently did a brand deal with a private jet company, and it spoiled us.
It's ruined us, dude. It's the only way I want to travel now. Shit, they had champagne. They were like telling us about this fruit platter. He goes, this fruit platter is $500. I'm like, dude, give me all the strawberries. Yeah, $100 for the strawberries right there. Where do you see 2025 heading for your production company? Like if the year ends, what do you hope to accomplish? You'd be super stoked on.
So I think one of the important parts for me is that I'm not motivated financially. I'm someone who gets a lot more amped when I get to work on creative that I'm proud of. And I also get to network and work with individuals that light me up and make my life more meaningful. So I would consider a successful year in 2025 if I connect with the right creators and cinematographers and videographers who I can have a long-term relationship with to make amazing things around the world. And then that energy, those teams become really like highly contagious for other people to want to work with, because that energy on set, like negativity spreads so quickly. So like if you're just doing it for the check at the end of the day and everyone's just there, not even really interested and not even excited about what they're making, this is something that's just going to like fizzle out anyways. I think this is all about building the backbone of like the right people, the right energy, and the right ideas. And those will be the markers of success for me, because I've always found when I made that my like North Star, financially, everything returned anyways. And so rather than making it like, we got to get a 6-figure deal, that's what will make this sick. It's like, yeah, I've been there, done that. And I wasn't always the happiest person on those sets because money really won't be everything. And that's not the marker that I care about anymore. So for a very long response to your question, a successful year will look like meeting even more incredible people that I can continue to work with internationally, travel to more locations, have an element of a give back where we can work on some documentaries for some non-for-profits, as well as feel like at the end of 2025 that, let's say, 80% of the projects I feel very proud of.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think we were chatting about this too the other day, and it's like we really just want to work with partners that fill up our cup, because we've made so many videos that when you do something that you just aren't enjoying, it's like, what are we doing here, dude? It's
like, I don't care how much I'm getting paid for it.
It doesn't matter. It's just like, this is so not fun. And I feel like those projects deplete your creativity so much more, than something that you really enjoy. And it's like, we're doing a little documentary right now that we're like a little short doc, and it's so fun and it doesn't feel like work. And it's crazy that I'm like, man, I need to do like 3 of these next year to really keep my juices flowing. And it's like, it doesn't feel like work. It feels fun. It keeps us fresh. And I'm very excited to go pick up the camera again. Do you have those projects right now that you're kind of thinking of in the back of your mind that aren't for money, aren't for the production company? They're like, this stuff is just really fires me up and you're looking to do more of it?
Yeah, I think we're actually spending a lot of time investing back into our own spec ads. I think there's a lot of like brands that I've been really like excited to get more into that space that I haven't really explored before, like Hamilton watches, like being one of them, where we got introduced, we're starting to like build the relationship. I'm like, I want to make watch commercials because like I'm so big into horology anyways that I would be lit up by the opportunities to make more content like that. Another vertical that we're like exploring is through a company called Sewn, and it's basically they connect filmmakers with non-for-profits to make documentaries for the companies that can't afford them so that those companies can get access more funding. So now we get the chance to like go to amazing locations, tell more interesting stories that actually leave a meaningful impact, create an asset that's actually going to have a ripple effect to fund these non-for-profits with more opportunities so that they can leave a bigger impact. And so those are things where it's like, we'll have commercial projects, we have clients in that space. And I think the last side of it on a more business side is working with more travel agencies as well as travel related companies. Like I'm the happiest and most lit up when I'm exploring somewhere new. And like, you know, it kind of comes back to when we like first met Costa, where it was like in Japan. Every time I'm in Japan, I was like, I don't want to leave this place. Like this place like is so amazing to explore. So having more opportunities to get on the ground, meet locals, tell authentic stories, and really just like give back.
I feel the exact same way. I feel like I'm my best self and happiest when I'm exploring a new city with my camera. That trip to Japan was one of my favorite, if not my favorite trips I've ever taken, because one, Tokyo just rips, but
yeah.
Like I had never experienced anything like that before of like, hey, here's a camera. You're going to be in Tokyo for 6 days and just go shoot and have fun and explore. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, I can't believe I'm getting to do this. So I totally feel you
travel
on that.
changes you, right? Like
yeah,
travel
it does.
makes you, it gives you a scope into completely different ways of living, which is an incredible thing to have when you can relate to your own experiences somewhere, because I can come back and be able to empathize with even more people and their lived experiences. And for me, the more I can even get on the ground, like I went to Socotra earlier this year in March. And for me, being able to go to a country like that, where it's perceived so heavily in like Western media as being like war torn and scary, don't ever go there. And then to end up actually on the ground on this island, like very far from Yemen, and meet the people, see how beautiful life is there, see their own experiences and challenges, seeing what's happening from like an economic standpoint, and then also from like a visual standpoint, that changed, going there changed my perception of the Middle East in a very positive way.
You know, I also think like from a content perspective or just from, you know, visual storytelling or just a storytelling in general, like one of the best things you can do for your storytelling abilities is to just go experience life. When I was a senior in college, I took a business of acting class, and one of our assignments was to like interview a successful actor or an actor who's had some success. So I interviewed a friend's dad who was a working actor and had some success. And he was like, if you want to be an actor, my advice to you would be, don't start acting, go experience life for like a year, 2 years, and then come back to acting, because you'll have way more experience and stories to pull from to bring into these characters. It always stuck with me. Like, I'm not doing acting, but I think the best thing somebody can do to become more interesting and to bring more experience into their storytelling and into their art is to just go travel, go experience like not only new places, but just new cultures and different people.
Yeah. I actually refuse, if I can, to take like Ubers in countries. Like I always take public transit. Like even like we were just down in Puerto Vallarta, like I would much rather take public transit and be with the locals and travel with them than go out of my way to like have Uber Lux take me around. And it's not even about affording it and being comfortable, because that's like one perception. I just think for me, you get to really experience how the actual people of an area, you know, experience day-to-day life. And I think you get to meet, like some of my favorite people I've met have just been on the ground in passing in conversations. Like I just so happened when we were walking around Mexico, like I didn't go to any of the spots that people go and say, hey, you should go here and check out this location. Like, I love to free roam like crazy. I'll do my research to make sure I'm safe. And then we stumbled across like one of the greatest coffee shops. And then I ended up going inside and finding out this guy's like a legend, has been brewing his own coffee in the area for like 20 years. And this was like, if you're into coffee, I apparently just happened to randomly meet one of the gods of coffee roasting in Mexico.
That's awesome. You bring up public transport, and I was blown away in Tokyo at like how clean the subways are and how quiet they are. Like, I just think of the subway system in like New York, and that's kind of all I really have to go off of. It is unbelievable how respectful everybody is on the subways in Tokyo.
Absolutely. There's just something about being, for me, I'll judge a country off of like three things. It's like, do they have access to really good coffee? How easy is it for me to like move my body around? And then how easy is it for me to find a bathroom?
Nice. Yeah. Especially if you're drinking a lot of coffee, you're going to have to find bathroom. I pee like 17 times a day because of how much coffee I drink. You bring up spec ads and how that's something you want to dive more into in this upcoming year. And it's really that's really refreshing to hear, because I feel like someone might look at you and be like, you're super well established. Like, you don't necessarily need to work on any spec ads because you probably already have a kick-ass portfolio. I made a spec ad this past year, and it's something that I'm trying to do a lot more of in this upcoming year. Can you talk about the importance of creating spec ads and how pivotal that has been in your career?
Well, one, spec ads give you the opportunity to exercise your skill set in areas where you don't feel confident. You know, I can easily build a niche and be like, I know how to make like YouTube videos, and I've gotten really good at making YouTube videos, but it's like, I don't really know if I still have the same pulse on like what it's like to make a watch video. I don't know what it's like to go and make a, luxury yacht video. And so if I want to work on projects like that, or I want to make a documentary, I have to go out and make those things in order to actually have those jobs come inbound. Two is I'll always use spec ads as an opportunity to connect with people that I've always wanted to work with. Because a lot of the times there are DPs and producers and directors out there that aren't working in the moment, but they want some experience. They want to go out and do something. So, either you can say, hey, I'll pay your expenses as well as like give you a small honorarium. Would you be interested in working on this if you have any like laneway? And a lot of times people do. And so for them, it gives them a chance to also exercise their skill set. You get to build a relationship, because ultimately this is a relationship-based industry. We're all creatives, beating hearts, ideas. Like, if you get the chance to collaborate with more people, even people that you think are completely inaccessible to you, still want to work on stuff like this. And so a lot of the time it's just about asking. And so, we're going out of our way to work on these things so that also by the time we get to actually working with a client, I feel confident. And two, I don't have to go back and forth trying to make what their vision is. I get to make what my vision is, because maybe the client's not down to have a bush plane come and bomb the beach while like when I say bomb the beach, it's like just fly low to the beach. I'll be very careful with the language there. Having like a bush plane coming very, very low to the beach while someone's like on a motorcycle and you're doing like a spec ad for that. That is just like, in my eyes, could be like a really, really cool visual. And they're going, here's the red tape. Legal says this, blah, 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 blah. And all that stuff kills energy, that kills momentum, that slows down process. And if you have an idea to make something and you can put like $2,000 into something, $5,000 into something. And I say those numbers relative. It's always going to be like, you can make something for $0 and just be very creative. And it's ultimately, you can still make a spec ad for like next to nothing, just sweat equity. But if you have money that you can put into it and place it in the right areas, you can make a product that looks like it was $100,000 for like $5,000.
Yeah, 100%.
I think everyone listening, you should go make a damn video this week. Get on top of it.
Yeah, 100%. Switching topics a little bit right now, something that you told us on the pre-show call was that you've been able to overcome some people-pleasing tendencies, which has super like positively transformed your personal life and your business as well. So can you talk about how your people-pleasing tendencies were like affecting you both in your personal life and in your business?
Yeah. So for anyone that's like listening and maybe is a little less aware of like what a people pleaser actually is it's really just somebody who ends up like giving too much of themselves in order to make like other people happy. And the result of that typically means that you kind of like push down your own emotions. You start to build a resentment. You start to like feel like, what honestly is very interesting is you actually just get a lot of like body tension and you just feel like hyper stressed and anxious all the time. And so it's hard when that is also your baseline. Like I came from a family, like both my parents are people pleasers. I love them dearly, but you know, I didn't know until someone had told me, hey, by the way, like a friend of mine was just brutally honest with me, was like, hey dude, by the way, like I think you're a people pleaser and I think it's like ruining your life. And I was like, tell me more. And then I read a book and I had like never felt so seen in my entire life of like my own lived experience.
That's
and
a real
typically that
friend.
means that if someone starts to like give you pushback on something, you so desperately just want them to be happy and like you that you go, yeah, no problem. I'll do it for less money. So that's a perfect example of being a people pleaser and how it impacts your business. That you go, they say, oh, we only have a budget of $5,000 for this. And you're like, well, I quoted you 25. And they're like, well, we only have 5,000. You're like, all right, I'll do it. And then, and then you're like, but you know, and then deep down, you're like resenting the project. You're like mad at them. You never, like you should have just said no. And that's the hardest thing for a people pleaser to do is just to say no and make them a priority because you ultimately think that you're disappointing people, but the person that you're disappointing the most is yourself.
I relate to that so much. I think that without even knowing it, like just after the talk that we had, the pre-show call, like I was starting to think about it a lot. I'm like, I think it's affecting me. Like I think I'm too much of a people pleaser. What is the book that you read? Because one, I'm very interested, but I think some listeners would also be interested in reading that.
I think the best deep dive that I've read was a book called Not Nice. If you look that up online, I'll actually just make sure that I can reference it here while we're chatting. But basically, the book is called Not Nice by Dr. Aziz Gazpour, professional doctor. He's
a pro.
Off there. He's
this
a
guy's
pro.
licensed.
He's no longer a people pleaser. I think that book in particular gives you like exercises to go through where you start to practice boundaries. You start to like speak up and say what you honestly feel. And so in a interpersonal way, like how that would show up is somebody will say something that you disagree with and you'll still go like, but like the best part of that is that you should just speak and share your own opinion. And if that scares that other person away, that was never really your friend or your person anyways, because a healthy friendship and a healthy dynamic is two people who can disagree and still be homies. And like that's how it should be, is that a difference of opinion shouldn't mean that someone likes you less or more for that situation. So it took a lot of practice and it starts in smallest ways. Here's like the best way that I started to like practice this. We're at the movie theater is sold out and I'm sitting in the middle row and I have to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, oh, the movie should end in about a half an hour. Or just go to the bathroom and make it slightly uncomfortable for somebody for 2 seconds. And the funny part is that like you go through it and then it's like, it's weird. I'll like self high five after like I cross the row. But for a people pleaser, that's a really big deal because they don't want to disrupt someone's like in that experience, their movie experience. But any reasonable person is just going to be like, well, this is a corporation that tried to maximize their profits and put seats really close together. So, you know, too bad. They have to stand up. That's just the way it is. And the reality is that like no one's mad. Has anyone ever been like, oh, dude, you're making me ruin this movie right now? Like no one says it. They just stand up and they do the weird and they get out of the way and it's done. It's all good. So I think once you start to exercise it in your personal life, it actually becomes a lot easier to advocate in your business because things always come up. A client could say, hey, we really want to change the music. And then rather than just saying yes to like make them happy, you now have to say, no, we're not changing the music because you agreed to this music ahead of time. If you'd like to change the music, it's no problem, but it's going to cost this much for a re-edit. And for a lot of people, that like I say it as like a recovering people pleaser, and I still get a little like just like quick little like anxious moment comes out of like, right? 'Cause what are they
No,
gonna
it's fine.
say?
It's
And
fine.
it's
I'll
like,
keep the song.
We can keep that song. We can change it.
Yeah.
No problem.
yeah.
You've absolutely crushed YouTube. You've been at it for quite some time. And you mentioned that when you saw the success on YouTube that you were like wanting so bad that it didn't really feel like this huge accomplishment. And I'm wondering, has your relationship changed with YouTube? Like, what place do you feel like you're at right now with your YouTube channel, with creating on YouTube?
Yeah. So I would say that my YouTube channel went from being my identity and the thing that I thought brought the most value to people in the world to now my job. And I say that in a really healthy way. And not in a way that it's like, oh, this is the vehicle for achieving all of my dreams and all of my things that I've ever wanted. When really it's like, at the end of the day, I had this moment like basically 2 or 3 years ago where I had identified that I was like, well, I'm not happier because I have X amount of followers. I'm not happier because I have X amount of dollars in my bank account. I thought those would be the things. Okay, what just happened here? Why do I still feel sad and anxious every single day when I wake up? And why is it super hard for me to create sometimes and super easy at other times? And so I did have the privilege and the luxury of being able to like slow down by having access to like some finances and some space and time to just kind of chill out for a little bit, which allowed me to kind of identify that I was like, really, and it sounds so intense to say this, but I think it will be relatable to a lot of people. It's like, I couldn't admit to myself that I actually liked myself or that I like loved myself. And what I needed 500,000 people, 600,000 people to be watching me and liking me and telling me like, you're good at your stuff, we like you, to feel like. But the issue with that is that it's like a cup that has a hole in the bottom. You can keep filling it up, but if you don't know how to fill your own cup or stop the leak, then that's like an addiction. And so I didn't even realize that I was in this addiction based off of my own insecurities and my own like, things that I experienced in my youth that made me feel like I needed to prove myself so heavily to other people. And so what's amazing about where I'm at now is that I'm no longer motivated by views and likes and gaining followers. It's now that I look at being like, how can I use my platform to add value to the world in a good way? And what I really am happy about in the full circle of all of this is that what I've built is still like a really positive thing and a really beautiful thing that I don't need to like leave, but just like reframe how I look at it. And that reframing looks like, actually, this channel, even though I was seeking validation, still taught so many people how to build a business and become creators who could make a living off of their craft. So that's something to be like really proud of. And all I want to do now is lean more into teaching and lean even more into using it to build businesses and to give back and to take the Chris Howe brand to leave even more of a meaningful mark in a way. And not from like an ego perspective, but in a way that I can say, here it is, it adds value. My voice and my experiences can transform people's lives in a meaningful way. That's a great reason to wake up.
How did you go about reframing your mindset? Because it's not so easy. Like you're talking about things that, stem from stuff you probably experienced as a kid and is wired into your subconscious that a lot of people like don't even realize that they are affected by these things. So how did you go about reframing your mindset, and maybe what are some actionable steps people can take if they're feeling these same feelings?
I mean, the hardest part is just admitting that you are kind of going through it. And some of the times it will just be like, well, if you even have a hunch that you might have like validation issues, or you have a hunch that you are like motivated by the wrong things, if you could just kind of like let your ego step down for a second, it's recognizing that like you'll feel pretty seen and heard if you read a book on it, or someone like, maybe you just have like one therapy session and being like, you know what, hey therapist, I don't think I have validation issues, but like let's just chat about it for an hour. And probably by the end of it, they'll tap into something that ends up being, a small tear or rip within your own self that allows I heard this great quote is like, a tear or rip allows like the light to come in, and that allows you to like finally shed some light on the darker parts of yourself. And so for me, it really started with being like, I had an ego, and I'm really okay with saying that. Like, I didn't know that I had such a large ego during my like early 20s. And that really looked like not putting other people first. And for me, not putting other people first, but that I always put myself first, and that I would like use people to like leverage my career. I would do everything I absolutely could to achieve the validation like thing that I desperately needed without even knowing. It's like a drug. You're like, I need this so badly. I'm addicted to it. Because once you get the little hit of like validation on social media, and for people who suffer from what I suffered from, it's something like no joke. It'd be like that was like 5 years of my life where I was like on a perpetual cycle without even realizing it, that I was like addicted to and needed to feel like baseline calm. And it was one moment for me that you'll start to recognize that when you like might have like a light panic attack or you're feeling hyper anxious in a moment, that's your body giving you signals that like, hey, something's off. And so I can tell a story where I was on a trend of basically like at the time getting, views on YouTube of around like 20,000 to 40,000 on like every single video and like within 24 hours. And I was like, oh, that's great. That's my baseline. That's baseline. Like I can breathe. And then one video got like 3,000 in 24 hours. And I didn't even understand why I was having a panic attack. I was freaking out. I couldn't be present with friends and family. I like was like hovering over the delete button for it, but because it was a brand deal, I couldn't delete it. So I was having all these like optic perceptions things, thinking like, oh, my career's falling apart. My life is built on a castle of sand. Everything's disappearing right now. When it's such a drastic response to somebody who isn't from that would be like, dude, why are you freaking out? Who cares? Still going to make another YouTube video and get the bag. And I'm like, oh no, it's not. And then you go like, it's not even about the bag. It's about like, something in me thinks that like I need to be perceived as being like likable and cared about. And then at that point you have to actually just like start to journal, start to pay attention to the things that like are coming up for you. And it's a really like hard thing because life is already pretty like difficult sometimes as a baseline, just between like our bills and interpersonal dynamics and everything like that probably the last thing that you want to do is be like, let's open up Pandora's box to all my demons as well and see how that's impacting my life in a really negative way. And so I'm giving you a really long response, and I would love to give you like more like bite-sized pieces of like meaningful feedback. For me, like I can't recommend therapy enough. I heard a really great quote that while I was reading this book, that even 1 hour with a therapist will have a helpful reframing for you that impacts the rest of your life. So even if you were to dedicate like 20 hours, those 20 hours will have a ripple effect on the rest of your life. And the funny part is that people will go to the gym and put in like 20 hours and see marginal gains. And then if you don't continue with it, it disappears. But the coolest part about therapy is that it stays with you forever. And so it changes you, which I think is a really like big part of the consideration around why therapy is so useful and meaningful. And then 2 is like, I read so many books. Like I probably crush about like 4 or 5 like audiobooks a month, and I'm always listening to them. And a lot of the books that I'm diving into are things like the people pleasing tendency. That's like the current one on my radar, because this is the thing that I'm like, I want to work on this. I want to find ways to even create my day-to-day experiences to be more meaningful. And the fact that you can access like thousands of hours of research condensed into something that's digestible for like $20 is one of the greatest parts of our time on this planet in the world that we live in right now. Because previously, if you wanted this, you had to go and read scrolls at like in these big scrolls, you know what I mean? You have to actually go to the library and like check out a book and then read the book and return it. And now you can just access endless information or be on podcasts like this where you have individuals talking about things that add value to your business, your life, your self-reflection and growth. So those like, find those outlets, find those pieces of valuable information, and then also just like ask your homies who you're close with to just be like, hey, straight up, like, what parts of my personality do you think I could be working on? And if you have a real friend that's like willing to just like tell it to you straight, they might just say like, hey man, I've kind of experienced like some elements of like you always putting yourself first, or like it's always going to your house because it's convenient for you. I'd really love if you came to my place. And then a lot of the times for people who are in those experiences, they don't even know because you're so lost in your own sauce.
Yeah.
So that's so interesting. I appreciate you sharing all of that. I think people are going to take a lot of value from, I mean, just that little section. It's just, it's mind blowing, honestly. And I think it's not talked about enough.
No, it's not. I do want to give you a little bit of pushback though. Do you still think you can you say that you've read the book if you've listened to it on audio?
What I do is that I listen to it, and then if I really found it to be valuable, I buy the book and then listen to it and read it at the same time.
Oh, wow,
because
okay.
I'm just fucking with you because I have a buddy who, he doesn't do it anymore, but he had a podcast called I'll Be the Judge of That. And they would just ask like sociably debatable questions. And one of them's like, if you listen to an audiobook, can you tell someone you've read the book? I always thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah, I feel like I could confidently give you my response on that. It's like undeniably yes. Yeah. Like I wouldn't even question it.
Bro, I
don't need the paper. I don't need the paperback
to
prove anything to anyone.
I get those little summaries where I'm like, I'll look up if they got a great summary. This guy's like made all these motion graphics. I'm like, I will absolutely say that I've read this book.
Oh, dude, no.
Oh yeah, dude.
No.
25-minute summary. I'm like,
do that.
Dude, listen, I'm listening to the audiobook anyways on 2x speed. It's like the damn near the same exact thing to like watch this guy make this graphic of the top 10 things in this book. Has there been a moment with YouTube, Chris, where you've completely had to just step away? And if so, during that time, did you feel an immense amount of pressure to have to get back on the horse and start creating? Because I feel like we struggle with that on Instagram specifically, and with the pod, it feels like something where, I mean, for the pod specifically, I feel like we can't get off this horse. It's like we're on this horse every single week. It doesn't matter what's going on in our lives. And I'm sure a shit ton of people feel the exact same way with whatever platform they've picked to be their thing. It's like, what can you tell us from someone who's been in the game so long on just making this sustainable, making this something that we can do for the next 15, 20 years?
I mean, my experience with stepping away has really looked like mostly just slowing down. I've never like gone and said like, hey, I'm taking like a break for X amount of time. But while I was going through my separation, like I needed to treat my self-reflection in that time as important as showing up on YouTube. Because for me, if I don't have my reasons for showing up, if I don't have my like checks and balances in my own like life outside of that, then everything else falls apart. And so for me, that's through my own experience, just to answer your first part of that question. And then two, the sustainability part really comes back to, it's a slippery slope when you create content that you just want to do well on the platform. Because if you always optimize things to be like the most viral or the most data-driven or the most like digestible piece of content, the artist in you, the person that wants to share something meaningful, that voice will slowly like dwindle out and die. And then at some point you'll kind of be in a place where you're like, I don't even like the things that I make. And it's actually requires a lot of like conscious decision making to be like, hey, this is a good idea, but I don't want to make it because it's going to pull me away from something I'd actually rather be doing. Because again, if you don't fill your cup up or make happiness and enjoyment a priority, one of the exercises I did this past year was I went through all my life expenses and then said, how much money do I actually need to make to live and be comfortable? And wouldn't you know that like the money I was making was wildly disproportionate from the money that I needed to just live. And so even if you like don't let lifestyle creep come in, I go to pay my employees, to pay my mortgage. I never have like a car payment. Like I just always buy a used car and pay it outright. And so like, what's the gas? What's the trips that I'm on? And so I totaled that up with a financial planner and advisor. And I was like, this is how much I need to make. And then we worked backwards to be like, well, maybe you can actually pull the gas off of like other areas in your life so that you can create more room for enjoyment. And so that's kind of like a thing that I would consider, is that create how much your like cost of living is right now, and maybe even build one more chart that specifically talks about like the life you aspire to, so that you can go, all right, I need X amount of dollars to make my current lifestyle, but what I really want, and like whatever it might be, like if you really want a Ferrari and that's like super important to you because you love cars, so then figure out the cost of what the Ferrari is, work backwards on that, and then figure out like, okay, that's what actually is going to be my monthly income. And then you can build a career or pull back on a career so that you can just enjoy more time. Because at some point I was like living and breathing YouTube to the point where like I had learned to optimize my life so well that I was going on like trips 6 months of the year where they were all covered and paid for by like brands, but I always had a camera and I was always working. And I was like, I'm always working. Thought I was like, oh, I built this lifestyle where it's like I get to travel and I'm doing what I love. And if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. If you do what you love, you work 80 hours a week. And I mean that in a good way. Like enjoyment is a really big part of it, but you're still working. And I just didn't create space for myself to slow down, which meant when I did actually have the space to slow down after doing that financial graph, it allowed me to figure out more of like my insecurities, allowed me to figure out more of myself. And it allows me to know what my needs, my wants, my aspirations, what the next chapter actually looks like. Because I think right now, for anybody that's listening, we're probably in the one point of the year where you actually just sit and reflect because you have to. It's like, well, Christmas just happened, no business. Maybe I'll just take the week to like sit and reflect. And then you spend like maybe I'm not saying that everyone does this, but I used to do this, is I'd spend like 1 week reflecting on what I want. And then I would use that as the guiding part for the entire year, when really you have to be reflecting almost every single week because everything is constantly changing.
Yeah, 100%. My toxic trait is definitely thinking about like my aspirational, how much money I want to make for my aspirational lifestyle, as opposed to being like, this is the minimum amount I need to make. I'm like, I also recently realized, and I told this to Braden, that I realized I'm a Porsche guy. I always was like, oh, maybe Ferrari, Lamborghini. But I think like aspirationally, I think I want that Porsche.
Do you know the spec?
Huh?
Give me your Porsche spec.
It was, wait, hold on, I'll pull it up.
You got it.
It was, I'm still like doing some research, but I believe it is hold on, I texted it to Chase. I believe it's a 1973
Oh,
Porsche.
you're going old school.
Yeah, this is what I want. I believe
We
it's
spent 1 weekend with Johnny Rome's in Utah, and now he wants a Porsche. He wants the old school Porsche.
Oh, but
think it's
dude, buy a 944. Those things are like 10 grand.
This
You
is
can
what
get an
I want,
old
like,
944 Porsche.
I want a dark.
You gotta push it out for.
Yeah, I can see it. This is like what, a 911 or
Yeah,
like
911 fucking vintage.
Oh yeah, this is stunning with the green.
Yeah.
The like
Ooh, I
Porsche
want the
green
dark-
is
I want that
perfect.
money
Do
green.
you know that there's
Green.
I debated painting my office this color because they did a collaboration with a paint company, and you can get Porsche green on your wall.
Oh, need that.
Yeah.
Need that.
That's how you could start manifesting it. I feel like we could paint the living room that color, and then every day you'll walk out here and you'll start to visualize.
Yeah.
Visualize, and then
You can tell people you drive a Porsche, and then they're like, dude, you just have the color on their wall.
100%.
That's so fun.
I will say though, my girlfriend just bought a Porsche Lego set that we're in the middle of building, and that's my version of manifesting.
I like that.
It's in white. It's not in the green, but it'll do.
We can spray paint it the
Yeah,
Porsche green,
perfect,
and then we'll
perfect.
start to take the baby steps towards it.
When it comes to YouTube, what is your process now from like start to finish of ideating an idea to filming it to posting?
Yeah, there's a couple different places that we start ideas from. So a lot of what typically happens on YouTube is people will like have a YouTube title and then work backwards from the title. There's also chances where you're making content based on a brand deal. So like there's like, okay, this company has this product. How can we build a creative off of that like key selling points and or like the opportunities that they're trying to like focus on? And then you can also just have an idea. And if it lights you up and gets you excited, then that's something worth pursuing. But I really just have like a notes, like I have a shared Apple Notes with my like business manager. It's literally just called like YouTube ideas and shorts ideas. And anytime something comes up, I like write it down just as like a basic concept. And so one of the skits, like one of the things that we're working on right now, which is literally like self-funded. I only made it because I thought it made me laugh, was literally just started. I saw a masterclass ad and I was like, imagine there was a masterclass, but like for like the person has like no skill at all. And that was like the concept. And I was like, hi, my name is Chris Howe and I specialize in creating content that like nobody watches. And it's all about like, we have all these lines where it's like, if your self-worth isn't attached by views by the end of this course, your money back guaranteed. And it's really like all these like little moments. And I was like, okay, if I share the concept like I am doing right now and you guys are laughing a little bit, I go, okay, there's something there. If it's making you, I think John Cleese might have said this, where it's like, if it gives you the little like tickle of laughter, if it's a comedy piece, it's worth pursuing. And I think start with an idea, soft test it with like sharing with people. And then if there's like a little bit of interest, make a short on it. And then if the short gets a lot of like interest, then you can like build a longer form video. Because I think what was a process of making YouTube videos very easily is now something that like sometimes a YouTube video can take like 2 weeks to make. And it's like, that's in like resources, time, energy. And so I was like, you almost need to soft test ideas now before they like blow up and become something like much bigger. And then the success of the piece doesn't correlate properly with the career that you're trying to build.
Yeah, I really like that tip. I think like testing stuff short form, it's a lot more manageable and bite size. And if it performs well, like dive into the long form piece.
What's something you would do differently with YouTube with all of this knowledge you have? What's something maybe you could bestow onto us? We do that title thing now. We know the title ahead of time when we go into these pods, which is something of the last few months. And it makes it so much easier to craft our questions and kind of like the ideas behind it. What's something you could share to people that are trying to pursue YouTube that maybe you learned a few years down the line?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's really important to just put your reps in. You can sit and read all of the books and get all of the knowledge, but you will know what you like to make by just making a lot of things. And a lot of the times that looks like copying like another style that you're really inspired by. But what we actually need more of on YouTube is authentic voices. Like nothing will ever change the stories that you have as well as the lived experiences that you have. And so one, I think it's super, super important to just like get the reps in while no one's watching and just start making content. And that could look like making shorts or making YouTube videos. And then once something like make like 30 videos, and then at that point, see which ones did well and build your channel off of those like concepts. But make sure that some of those things you love to do. Like don't go and make a camping channel if you hate camping, and then all of a sudden these camping videos blow up and you're like, no, I gotta camp all the time. Like, dude, speak to what you know, speak to something that you already like have an interest in. Even if it's like Lego Porsche cars, your whole channel could just be about making variants of Lego Porsche cars, and you'd probably find an audience for it.
I'm thinking about it.
And what's the best thing now is that there's so many niches that blow up that you're like, I had no idea that this was a thing, but people absolutely love it. And so if you're interested in something and you can definitely see that no one else is doing it, 100% do that. Because it's like all of a sudden someone becomes like, what is it? Aaron Outdoors became the person that made little tiny figurine photos of people doing outdoor camping. And now she's like known for that, but that was just something that she made for fun. And so I always think about if there's already something you do that could just end up being your career in life, but make sure you enjoy doing it on that side of it. Because I think authenticity comes through more, and that's honestly all we need on the platform now.
Yeah, 100%. I'm definitely going to start making a Legos YouTube channel. We're going to start with the Porsche and then maybe expand to the Harry Potter world, maybe a little Star Wars. I'm going to build it all. Part of the niche that you're a part of is like a photographer, and I feel like that is a big identity of yours. But you told us that you're kind of trying to reframe that and reshape that. And yes, it's something you do, but it's not your whole identity. So can you talk to us about kind of reshaping your identity as a photographer and how you want to kind of move going forward?
Well, yeah, I think this is a really interesting thing because in like Western culture, I think it always becomes this like, what do you do? And then people will be like, oh, I'm a YouTuber, photographer, business owner. But like the reality is that we're so much more beyond that. And really what I'm trying to do, and not in this way that's like, oh, he sounds so woke. And it's like, no, I just went to France and I went to other places where you go like, what do you do? And they're just like, oh, I wake up, I make coffee. I really love to like drive my car and do X, Y, and Z. And the interesting thing about that is that all of a sudden you start to realize that like, well, maybe I'm not just a YouTuber and a photographer. Like those are skill sets that I have and that's like my career. but maybe like my actual thing is that I'm just a creative person. And so rather than like, oh, I always need to be taking photos all the time, what if I was just a creative person? And that's just one of my paintbrushes. And so I can use video, I can use photo, but what if I like didn't always lean on that because I have the skill set in it, but I could then all of a sudden turn, like, I always thought it was really interesting. A friend of mine, Stephen Kuntz, would like, he's like a designer and he like makes amazing graphic and illustrations, but he like started doing these things where he would like do graphic and illustrations with his finger in like snow covered cars and then do like amazing designs on like a fresh POW on the windshield. And like that stuff ended up blowing up. But if he was just someone that's like, oh, I'm just an illustrator and I only make illustrations, he might only lean on his computer to make stuff. But then if you're just a creative person who has vision, then everything is your like, you know, your
canvas. Yeah.
Yeah. I really relate to that. We were talking about this on the call, but I was touring for about 2 years with Loud Luxury, and that became a huge part of my identity without me even knowing it. And then I got really burnt out from being on the road, and I was like, well, shit, like I want to quit, but without this, like without concert photography, like kind of who am I? Like it became a sexy thing to say. And I've talked about it on the podcast before, and the response that I got from people being like, wow, like I feel the exact same way. I think a lot of people, creative or not, like I think a lot of what we do for work, what we do to make money is a huge part of our identity. But I love how you're trying to reframe that. And I think I need to spend more time in Europe and different places of the world, because I love the concept of, oh, what do you do? And it's like, oh, I like to do this, this, and this, not like this is what I do to make money.
Especially out here, I feel like that's the thing, man. Anyone you talk to is like, that's the second thing or first thing out of their mouth. Oh, what do you do for work?
It's what's like,
what do you do for work?
Nice to meet you. What's your name?
Yeah. What do you do for work? Exactly. And it's like, yeah, it's so.
The hard part about it is that we're set up for failure in that instance, a little bit around this society, because everyone's primed with being like, oh, what do you do? And then our response is that we respond with like the thing that we do all the time, which is our work. So first and foremost, it's like culturally, like it's become like a, how are you? And I call them like nothing conversations, because you're not even getting anywhere. You're not even learning about anything, because it's more shocking when someone goes like, hey, how are you? And they're like, oh, honestly, man, I'm kind of having a bit of a rough day. And you're like, oh, no, I didn't want that. I just wanted you to say good. And then I would say good, and we would go on with our day. But the reality is, it's like you have to ask more meaningful questions. And then the hard part is that, and then you get feedback where people are like, oh, you're like a concert photographer for where have you been? And then now you're like, oh, well, I'm getting interest. I have attention. People care about me. Okay, I'm gonna like lean into this more, right? And you don't even realize that you're getting these like really positive cues and positive feedback on your identity being attached to your career.
Yeah.
But I think it's like a really interesting act of practice to like literally like, why don't you just like write down what you think are the things that make you valuable outside of your career. Like I could be like, I'm a creative person. I'm a generous person. I'm an empathetic person. And it's not like super sexy things to say out loud, because people always want the like, oh yeah, like that's so crazy. What do you do? Like, because every time I tell people I'm a YouTuber, it's almost gotten to the point now where they're like, oh, YouTube. And it's either they like don't know what it is and they want to ask more questions, or they do. And then they like, your life is really interesting. And then all of a sudden you pull attention from other people as well. And so I try my best not to like, I don't have shame around being a YouTuber. I love it. And if someone is curious and wants to ask questions, I'll answer them for them. But I'm trying really hard to realize who I am outside of my job. Like I'm an adventurous human being. That doesn't mean that like if I'm a YouTuber and I travel, sure, that's interesting. But what if someone was just like, who are you and what do you do? I'm like just a pretty adventurous person, super open-minded. I really love like food. And then that could even be springboards to more interesting conversations that are not related to your career at all.
You've also embraced teaching as a big part of the things that you're doing. How do you see that kind of playing out in this next year? It's something that brings you, a lot of fuel. I think it does the same for us. Like it's so fun. And you mentioned it a little bit earlier in the show, but the idea of teaching something, whether it's like active or passive, like you make a YouTube video and someone taking that and making it a part of their career. And I'm sure you've had these conversations over the years where people are like, dude, without this video, like this sparked everything that I'm doing. And now I have like a thriving business in it. You know, what does that mean to you to be, you know, a teacher online or in person, online, whatever it may be?
Well, to give you a very concise answer is to teach is my life's purpose. And that really comes from like the mentality of the Ikigai, which is like a Japanese framework for figuring out your life's purpose. It's like, what are you good at? What does the world need? What can you be paid for? And it's about all these different circles overlapping. And in the middle, that's like your life's purpose. And it doesn't even need to be something that is like hyper niche, because people will be like, my life's purpose is to optimize data with startups within the Silicon Valley. Like, it doesn't need to be this whole very hyper niche thing. It could actually be as big as to teach. And the coolest thing about that is that it doesn't mean that I need to every day teach on YouTube or teach on social media. I could have a day where my fulfilling day and my most meaningful day could be as simple as being like downstairs, a friend comes over and they go, man, this coffee slaps. Like, how'd you make it? And be like, yo, let me show you. Come over here. We put the grind setting over here. These beans, they're from like Ethiopia. It's got this like berry thing. Did you taste the berry that hit there? And like, yeah, I taste the berry. And like, to me, that lights me up in the exact same way as if I tried to make my life's purpose like, oh, I have to show up on YouTube all the time. But that's not sustainable. I can't show up on YouTube every single day or I'll burn out. But what I can do every day is teach. And I can have a small moment of teaching, because I literally could just read a part in a book. Someone's like, what's new? And they're like, oh, I just learned this whole thing about people pleasing. And they'll be like, oh, tell me more. Right? The fact that, Costa, you even said that after our pre-chat that it made you think and reflect on maybe you being a people pleaser, dude, that means that that day had value.
Yeah. No, I know I am. I got to work on it for sure. You're also teaching though in person, like not just coffee. You're also holding these community events. Can you talk to us about these community events that you're having and how awesome it's been kind of fostering a community in person versus just online? Because for most of what we do, you know, a lot of it is like through a screen. And I think there is a lot of power in bringing people together. And so I just give you kudos for actually bringing the community together. So would love to hear your experience with hosting these community events and what they look like.
Yeah, I think the best part about having like IRL, in-person, offline events is it actually gives a chance for proper like connection and ripples to occur, because the reality is that you could go and say like, hey, dude, can we like go and DM, or like, oh, I really love your work. And maybe that conversation online like might lead to you meeting up in person, but reality is schedules never overlap and blah, blah, blah. And it just never ends up happening. But if you actually create an event where you know like 50 people are coming out, maybe 100 people are coming out, and you can even be the person that's like, hey, I think you two would like really vibe because I know that you do this and this, chat. And then you just like dip and let them see if like something sparks from that. My whole thing is that I thought it was so wild that we had like our own version of like a dope squad in Canada, where people were like, I want a group of friends that like goes out and shoots content. And some of the people from my social media sphere have become some of my like best friends. We're like at my wedding, are like there when I'm going through troubling times. And I think that is necessary on all levels. It doesn't need to just be aspirational when people are successful and they get to see people online doing it. That can exist. And I'm seeing these like little pods of people starting to like form after our events are done, and they're hanging out, they're becoming friends. And I think so many people online, but primarily in the creator space, feel so lonely because they don't know, maybe their like parents aren't into it, their family's not into it. No one's really like kind of like amping them up in the same way as somebody else who's kind of trying to do the exact same thing. And so I was like, I want to be the candle that like lights a single flame that ends up being like spreading out to everybody else's. And that's not, again, not from an ego standpoint, but from a place of being like, our world needs more of this. Let's do that. So I had self-funded like all of my own community events. I just had friends that like owned cool spaces and cool cars, and some people were models. I was like, hey, I'm doing this thing. We're going to sell tickets. It's going to be $10. All the money's going to charity. Let's just get everybody in a room together. And that thing is now rippled into being like, we're going on to like our 5th community event since starting it last year. And they keep scaling up. We have like sponsors on board now, which means that we can like pay people to like set these things up and make them more interesting to actually be at, hire people who are like super talented to come out. Like we've had Carl Shakur come out to one of our events. We just had Julie Noki and Jesse Driftwood. Up next, we got like Mark Bone and Nicole Shapiro. So like the fact that we can even bring some of these thought leaders, have honest conversations, have teachable moments in person, as well as having a chance for like people to make friends and play with gear and learn something, like that's like, that lights me up. But it's now though, I didn't realize it's so much work to put on an event. Like it is crazy. Like at the beginning when I did it, I was like, this is cool. And now that I'm like on my 5th one, I was like, wow, it is so much work.
We're going to be giving you a ring because we want to do some in-person stuff here in LA. And I think that'd be really fun to get all the rocks together, get all the people together, have a good time.
We'll start with just like a casual coffee meetup.
Coffee seems pretty chill. We don't need to get an event space, and we'll just bombard a coffee shop here. And they're going to be like, oh shit, all right, we got 50 new people coming to, you know?
Bring a DJ, just have some good music in the background. And then have some good coffee.
We'll just bring a board. He used to DJ in college, so maybe we can just, we'll save some money on that.
Get behind the decks,
we'll get you on the sticks, and we'll
Chris, if you ever need some music, dude, I got you. I'll fly out, fucking spin some tunes. It'll be fun. Good time.
That's funny, dude. What impact do you hope that those events have on the people that are able to come to them?
What I hope, which is really cool about something that we're working on right now with one of our like camera store companies in Canada, like they're literally like a national camera brand, is that we worked with them to be like, hey, if people come out to the event and post content from the event, can you like give somebody like a 3-month sponsorship, like some of their first jobs? And my hope is that the experiences that I've had in my position where I've been able to like give somebody a job, I've literally had certain people come and tell me being like, I was at the point of giving up. I was at the point of like realizing this wasn't for me, and your like job to hire me on for like shooting boosted boards gave me a reason to actually continue in this space, because it meant that this one data point means like I could probably make more money again. And that person's gone on to now just do that full time. They have like straight up like a film store where they do all of like their own processing. They become one of the biggest names in like Ontario. And then it's not about me being that catalyst. It's that I want to try to create jobs, because money and finances is empowering beyond its ability to like make us a living. It means that like if something deep down in us cares so badly about sharing our voice, and the world has just kept saying no, 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 and you get one yes, sometimes that's like all you need to keep going. And I hope to create as many yeses for our community as possible in that way.
I love it.
Let's go. Awesome.
I got one more for you. What is some advice to your 18-year-old self? If you could go back, talk to 18-year-old Chris, what would you tell him about this journey he's about to embark on?
Dude, people like you. It's okay.
I love it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. That's episode 139. If you're still here, please go subscribe to our newsletter down below. Check out all of Chris's socials. Drop us a comment, and we'll see you guys all next week. Peace.